child marriage is a human rights violation, and in many places, including Malawi, it is a crime according to law. It has many negative consequences for women and girls and for the overall development and prosperity of Malawi. One example of how child marriage holds us back in progressing as a nation is education. Child marriage is one of the main causes of school dropouts in Malawi. According to a national study from 2015, more than 1 out of every 20 girls drop out of school because of child marriage, and fewer than half of all the girls remain in school past grade 8. Girls who get married don't have to drop out of school, but they often do. And did you know that Malawi has one of the highest rates of child marriage in the world? Out of 195 countries, this country has the 12th highest prevalence of child marriage. And child marriage here affects girls far more than boys. And so this program, Ending Child Marriage, a national call to action, is helping us, each one of us, to understand the seriousness of child marriage in Malawi, its consequences, and what needs to be done to stop it. This is the second of the part 3 of series of the programs Ending Child Marriage in Malawi, a national call to action. And in program 1, we discussed many issues, current laws and why they haven't been working, pending the draft legislation that would criminalize child marriage, the need for better enforcement, and why child marriage is human rights abuse. And in this program today, we're going to look closely at the pending draft legislation. We will also look at the current laws to see why they aren't working, how child marriage puts a tremendous burden on the girl child, and what can be done to keep the girls in school, and why it's in everyone's interest to end child marriage. We have 4 guests in the program to discuss these issues today. My name is Twesa Ngosi. Thanks for joining us. And first of all, I'd like to welcome the Deputy Minister of Education, Honorable Madalitso Kambauwa Wirima. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Twesa.
I also want to welcome our Member of Parliament, Honorable Savel Kafwafwa, who is the Chairperson for the Social and Community Affairs Committee of Parliament. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
I also want to welcome Superintendent Alexander Ngwala, Regional Community Policing Coordinator. Welcome to the program.
Thank you so much.
I also want to welcome my Edna Tanazio. Program. My Edna Tanazio, she's a parent from Nchinji. She once married off her daughter, but she changed her mind along the way. And so she's also here to talk to us. What are the issues and what needs to be done? Because parents also have a critical role to play. And so child marriage is one of the key factors affecting Malawi's ability to achieve its development goals in education, health, and economic sectors. And so the first subject that we want to tackle is about the laws and the policies that are aimed at stopping child marriage. So we know we have the law enforcement, we also have the Member of Parliament, we have the Deputy Minister as well. So we're going to be looking at that. And we have the laws adopted in Malawi, but they don't appear to be working very well. And so our first question, our guests, you'll be responding to some of the questions from different districts. And so our first question coming into the program is from Maureen Mhone. And let's see what Maureen has to say, and then we'll take it from there.
Maureen Mhone, ndatuya kumpamba mshigawa shati eti mbili indi dabwa boma ni mafunga kazi kusamala mulunga kumalisa ndingwaza na mara vyomoza mamala mulunga nyagi byande nangu yapanga kweni makesi ngashitika mwana wairwa okuwairwa ndipenya dizibu tulia kuboma mala mulianga bulanchituli.
That's what Maureen says. It baffles me, a lot of chiefs and government enacting laws to curb child marriage, yet young girls are getting married. At least, are these laws being enforced, or they just appear on paper? First of all, I would want to get that question to you, Honorable Kafwafwa, who is a Member of Parliament for Delta North, but also the Chairperson for Social and Community Affairs Committee of Parliament. Laws are there, but no enforcement.
It is very true that sometimes we, as a nation, we have very nice laws. And in many aspects, not just about the laws, but in terms of governance, Malawi is well known to have very nice policies, very nice views on different subjects, and even some countries come to learn from Malawi. I can share with you that there was a time that even the current law on NGOs was actually reviewed by our friends from Tanzania. They copied from us and amended it, but we went to Tanzania to see how they are implementing it. So that's just an example. I can give you another example, like how in Rwanda, the agriculture issues, they copied from Malawian pattern. The one who is in there in Rwanda leading the program actually got his school from Bunda College of Agriculture. And then Malawians traveled to Rwanda to learn how the successes of Rwanda, something which is actually originating from Malawi. So we are so good at that. So the laws we have in terms of trying to stop or end child marriages is really a very tough law. And the punishments are really so tough. Of course, we have known that the enforcement part has been a challenge in some courts, because you could realize that one magistrate could give a sentence maybe 5 years for defiling a young girl. So for us, by law, any kind of sex that happens with anyone who is below the age of 18, it's actually breaking the law. There is nothing like child marriage, as we put it, though we know that's the way we understand each other. But for us, anything that happens below the age of 18 is an abuse. So the law is clear on that. So it doesn't matter who is doing it. If it is an older person, it is even worse. But now the challenge that we normally get is when young people, a young girl versus a young boy, that is where now the major conflict is coming in. But so far, the law is actually so tough that people can be given penalties of up to even sometimes maybe up to life imprisonment, because the minimum is actually like 7 years and above. So the magistrates can stretch the time, and we have seen recently that people are getting 21 years imprisonment and all that. But there is a lack of consistency in our courts that sometimes is making the enforcement being a problem. The other thing is how many perpetrators or the breakers of the law have access to the media that we normally use. It is much less. So as a committee, we are advocating to say such kind of cases must be tried within the communities. So it should be an open court where the court moves to the community, because that's the only way that the people in the village can access that, so that they can see how bad that situation is, and that's one of the ways that we can see that the enforcement is taking place. But if we just concentrate on newspapers, TVs, radios, some people in the villages, the defilers themselves, the ones who are breaking the law, they don't access that information.
I can see Superintendent is itching to respond, but before he comes in, I still want to come back to you, Honorable Kafwafwa. So the laws are being enforced. It's not just on paper.
Exactly, the laws are being enforced, but what I'm looking at is one, the major concern is consistency, and in terms in the courts, and then again, how do we highlight such cases? I sometimes admire the way the election case was, the presidential election case was.
Everyone was able to
the whole nation was glued to that. There are interesting cases which would have actually attracted similar kind of attention. For example, a certain man in Nsanje raped 3 young girls. That's the other one was about 7, the other one was 8, the other one was 9. This was something, raping them at the same time. So I wish if we could have such kind of cases getting their attention, maybe every radio station, or even Zodiac and other radio stations and TVs, if they could actually make their application to say, we think this is something worthy attention of our nation, so that such kind of cases can be broadcast live on radio and on TVs. That's the only way we can try to teach our nation for such kind of cases. A 70-year-old man maybe marrying or raping as I put it,
18-year-old,
a 17-year-old or 16-year-old. Those are issues which we needed to be highlighting as a nation. Let them get their attention. And when the judges are passing the sentence, whether it's 29 years imprisonment, let the nation hear that. That's the only way that people can know that, oh, the law is really biting hard and is being enforced.
Before we come to the law enforcers themselves, they're here to tell us how maybe the challenges that you've talked about in issues of lack of consistency. But Parliament will soon begin to debate the miscellaneous amendments bill, and in its draft form, it redefines a child 18 years of age, and instead of 16 and under. I think at this point we have the one that is 16 and under, and under the current draft, it contains the enforcement provisions, establishing of punishment for perpetrators and witnesses. So maybe from you, would this bill close the current loopholes, especially on the age part? I think that's a major concern as well. And how is that going to be?
Yeah, indeed, as a nation, we have different laws talking about the child and how somebody who is of young age should be treated. And there are over 20 different legislations which are talking about the same issue, but from different angles. Mm-hmm. And then you find that there will be some conflicting statements in those same laws. But what we are now basing our argument on as Parliament, we know that the Constitution of Malawi is supreme to any other act or penal code. Mm-hmm. So what was amended in the last sitting was actually the Constitution of Malawi. So that one, there is no chance that any judge or anyone should excuse himself by looking into these other conflicting acts or penal code or whatever other piece of legislation that you might come across. Because what was amended is the leading document, which is the Constitution of Malawi, which has clearly defined the child to be anyone under the age of 18. So, but we know that code, lawyers, and the way people argue about the law, they find loopholes in taking that. For example, this other legislation talks about age of consent for sex being 16.
Yes.
And then in the Constitution, as we are talking, is saying no, anyone having sex below the age of 18 is a kind of child abuse. So those are some of the things we needed to close to make sure that everything talks about the same age. And we hope that legislation of miscellaneous amendment will close those gaps, and there will be no excuses later on in the future. And the confusion that has been existing, we hope it will be closed. Superintendent
Ngwala, I would like to come to you before we get to the Deputy Minister of Education, especially on issues of school dropouts and how child marriage has affected our girls. Issues of enforcement. I think we've heard from the Honorable Kafwafwa how the enforcement issues have been a challenge, because I think issues of ineffective investigations and willingness to prosecute and lack of resources have also affected heavily the problems of enforcement. Why are these issues not being addressed?
Right, thank you so much. As clearly indicated by Honorable Member of Parliament, in Malawi, we are rich in terms of legislations. We have Constitution of Malawi that has defined the child properly, any person under the age of 18. We have Marriage, Divorce and Family Relations Act that is prohibiting marrying a person under the age of 18. We also have Penal Code, has a lot of sections that are protecting children, mainly on issues of sexual abuse, but also the Child Care Protection and Justice Act is also rich in terms of looking at the same issues. The main gap in terms of enforcement, I should start with the success. The success is the fact that a child under the age of 16 is well covered by Section 138 of Penal Code. Any person who has sexual intercourse or carnal knowledge with a girl under the age of 16, that is straightforward, it's defilement. And that will be prosecuted under that section. the maximum sentence, life imprisonment. That is taking place in all police formations, and if you read carefully in terms of data and newspapers, you hear that there are a lot of cases of child marriage reported this time than previous. The reason is the deferment cases is now overcrowded by cases of child marriage. Because if you withdraw a girl child, who is under the age of 16 from marriage, then the man will automatically become a perpetrator of deferment. Now, the gap in terms of investigating and prosecuting cases of child marriage is the fact that we are not protecting carefully the age group from 16 to 18. Because according to Marriage, Divorce and Family Relations Act, they say any person under the age of 18 should not get into marriage. There is no section that is punishing the one that will marry a girl between 17 and 18.
Okay.
So we are very happy that we have a chair for social affairs and community development. In terms of amendments, that should be looked at carefully, for that's a gap that is remaining. In terms of overall age of a child, I'm seeing that it will not come at a point where we have one definition of a child, because each definition will actually look at a certain circumstance at which a child is in. There is issues of criminal responsibility. Any child under the age of 10 can criminally be liable to an offense, 10 or 14. This is actually taking into consideration of Convention on the Rights of a Child, African Charter, and all other laws in the world. So we want to come at a point where we'll have one definition of a child. I'm not quite sure. If that will come into pass, we'll be happy as the law enforcement agencies.
Where it's 18, 18.
18, 18, it will still look at a circumstance.
Okay.
If I remind you, the age of deferment was previously at 10. Up to 2010, it was at 10 years. So it was raised to under the age of 16. So we are making progress. If Parliament will now take it to the below age of 18, that will be okay with the enforcing. The only issue that is now overwhelming in all police formations is the fact that there is an outcry where a lot of young boys are now getting into prison, because if a young boy like 14 or 15 years is in that relationship with a girl of under the age of 16, if that boy is caught, then definitely that boy is going to answer the case of deferment. So if we raise the age to under the age of 18, we should also look at what are we going to do to make sure that we are protecting young boys. So that's the only issue that will be looked at carefully. Otherwise, in terms of enforcement in Malawi, there are pieces of legislation that are being considered by all police formations, all police officers. Cases of deferment are rising mainly because of increased number of cases of child marriage.
Thank you very much, Superintendent. We'll come back to you at some point. Honorable Deputy Minister, anything that you would want to come in on the issues of enforcement before we come in into the issues of readmission policy and the girls dropping out of school?
Thank you for that. I was really leaving the issue of enforcement to the panelists that have spoken before me, because I think they have well articulated, and I think they have clarified on most of the gray areas we may have had. But just to say that it's sad that with all the pieces of legislature, with all the rich legislation that we have, we are still grappling with the issue of child marriages, which is now leading us to having problems where our girls are concerned when it comes to for them to stay in school. Thank you.
While we still have the microphone, we know Malawi is implementing the readmission policy where a girl gets pregnant, they have an opportunity to go back to school. I have personally spoken to quite a number of girls in different programs where okay, I got pregnant and I am back to school, and several other things. But oftentimes there are other girls that actually don't come back for different reasons.
Yes.
If that girl is married off, it means maybe the husband will say, no, you are supposed to stay at home and not go back to school. Or maybe, several examples. One of the girls that I met had said, I didn't want to go back to school because I felt that my friends were going to laugh at me. The stigma and the embarrassment. And I met one girl who actually said my mother would come to school with the baby so I could breastfeed her because we didn't have an opportunity for us to buy milk for the baby. So she would come during school break, I would breastfeed her, and I can actually imagine probably the embarrassment that she's been through. So there are all those issues that are happening in terms of our girls not going back to school. So before you come in, Honorable Minister, I would like to bring a question from Pastor Yohane Chizomola from Blantyre on what we need to do to promote child rights and stop child marriages, and just also look at the issues of why girls are not coming back to school. Probably address these issues of stigma and sometimes even the school authorities, specific schools that would say, no, we wouldn't want to have those girls back to school. There are all those things, patches of such happening in the different communities. Let's bring Pastor Yohane.
Kodi maskulu mwachitapo chani polimbikitsa ufulu wana komanso pothetsa maukwati ana amene akumakwatira msanga m'madera mwathu m'dziko lino la Malawi?
Pastor Yohane says, what is being done in schools to promote child rights and stop child marriages? But I think in the first place, Honorable Deputy Minister, I would want you, to address the issues of their admission policy, especially why the girls are not returning to school when they go, they are pregnant, they have the opportunity to be admitted, but they are not going back to school. Yes.
There are several issues that affect any learner when they are in an institution of learning. And when a girl has either been married off, or they've married themselves, they've dropped out of school for whatever reason, due to pregnancies, for them having to go back, just like you earlier alluded, there are also a lot of factors that affect them having to go back to school. For those that may have had babies, there are several issues that will make it difficult for them maybe to stay in school. I know that some girls will come from families that are riddled with poverty, and then for their parents to be able to look after the babies, having to buy the formula, having to go through everything that's required for a baby to be able to be well looked after, that becomes a challenge. And so among the reasons that it's difficult is this. But also some parents are just not supportive enough, because some parents do have the resources. They do have everything at their disposal to actually make it able for this girl, for this boy to go back to school, but they just don't offer the support that child, that learner needs. And these kinds of issues are the ones that maybe would get addressed if we have enough sensitization, but also sensitization at the levels that we need to have, where it actually gets to the intended audiences. In other situations, it's also the issues of the girls themselves that have to go back to school. You mentioned issues of stigma, where they would think that if I go back to school, then I'm going to go through a lot of ridiculing, a lot of derogatory remarks coming my way. I hear of some girls that have gone back to school being called all sorts of names, chembere and stuff like that. And just from the thought of that, they would not want to go back to school and face that kind of a challenge after having their baby. But also, sometimes it's also the stakeholders at the school, the teachers themselves, that may not offer the support to these girls that they require. So I think it's an array of issues, but at the end of the day, if we value our education, if we value as a country and as communities, if we know what's in it, if we know how to support our learners, then I think we'll be able to do a good job to ensure that these issues that I've just indicated are done away with.
Any specific things that you actually think we can do to ensure that our girls get back to school when once maybe they get pregnant, they give birth to the baby, and then they come back? Any specific things that we as a country can do?
Yes, there are certain things that we can do. I'll try to spell out some of them. First of all is, like I said, a sensitization across the board. A sensitization, it has to start with the individual themselves, the one that's going to school. Because if we work on them, once they are equipped with the information that they need to be equipped, it will allow them to stay in school. For example, if we are able to speak to these girls and say that it's okay to have a baby, it's okay to have gone to a marriage and go back to school, and you just focus on your future. You just focus on what you're going to get out of this education and stay in school, and then the rest is going to work out. So first of all, we have to also, first of all, work on the learner themselves, the one that is interested in going back to school. Secondly, I would say we also have to sensitize the teachers, the teachers and other learners in the schools, that it's okay to have these girls. We're concentrating on the girls. So I was going to also say the boys, because there are also boys that drop out of schools. But these girls that had gone to marriages, that had fallen pregnant, they've had babies, it's okay to have them in school and have them to continue with their education without having to make them go through their education after that in an unconducive environment, if I may put it. I would also say we could also have maybe early childhood development centers, where in cases where girls are not able to have their guardians, their families look after the babies, these ECDs can actually provide the actual services that would allow the girls to be in school while also their babies are being looked after in a safe space, in a safe environment, and also give them a peace of mind that they can actually concentrate on their studies because their babies are actually in these so-called safe spaces, the early childhood development centers.
So the question that the Honourable Minister has actually responded is the same question that Agnes Master from Mchinji asked, that some girls who live in poverty, and that's why they get into an early marriage, in order for them to survive. How can these girls be helped? Let's watch Agnes.
Inayofusilanga ndiri kuti palatsika nayena amene mwina akuchokera mabanja ovutikitsitsa difa cha mumphawi umene uli kunyumba kwawo apeza kuti amakwatiwa kuti mwina akachitenga lapanga asa athetsa kwa achipetsako mavuto ameneyo koma chali naye ndi nyama khatu sofuna akwatiwa koma iwowo amangoka zipereka ku banja ifene kuti mwina akakhalepo ndi moyo wabwino kusiyana ndi umene uli kwawo atsika nachoncho.
This is Ending Child Marriage in Malawi, National Call to Action. In case you want to join the discussion, you can actually send a WhatsApp message on this number, 0997-932-888, 0997-932-888. You can also join the discussion on our Facebook page, Zodiac Online, but also you can send through our SMS platform, 54141. But you send your message, you write ECM, Ending Child Marriage, you send your message or a question, in case you have a question, and you send it to 54141. And we should be able to address those questions or comments in our next program. We'll be back shortly. Welcome back. My name is Twesa Ngosi, and this is Ending Child Marriage in Malawi, a national call to action. It's a national call for all of us. We need to stop child marriages in our country. And in the program today, we have the Deputy Minister of Education, Honorable Madalitso Kambauwa Wirima. We also have the Honorable Savel Kafwafwa, who is the chairperson for the Social and Community Affairs Committee of Parliament. He's a member of Parliament for Dedza North. And we have Superintendent Alexander Ngwala, Regional Community Policing Coordinator. We also have our mom, who is a parent, Edna Tanazio from Njinji. So shortly we'll be talking to Edna Tanazio just for us to appreciate. Edna, she once married off her daughter, but changed her mind along the way. So we want to understand what exactly happened and all those things that we can learn from her as a parent. But before we come to Edna, Honorable Kafwafwa, there was something that you wanted to add based on what the Honorable Minister had said.
Yeah, indeed. In Malawi, we know many girls are willing to go back to school. But somehow we also, as a nation, we need to try to bring in some kind of enforcement on our behaviors. Because there are, especially male students, they like to bully these girls. Because I have an experience during our secondary school days, we knew there was one girl who had given birth and her parents sent her back to school. But I could tell you during those days, during weekends, when we were so excited, we could go to the girls' hostels, chanting, calling her name and singing Alindi Mwana. You could imagine that, and at least boys are chanting, but we couldn't be punished. We were free. So that kind of attitude is still existing in these secondary schools, primary schools. There should be a way of trying to bring in some good behaviors where this girl can complain to say, you know, I had this condition, and I have a child, but these are the words that these guys are using against me. So we need to protect the girl from such kind of abusive words. The other issue which I also observed is in Malawi, Malawi Parliament, in every sitting, we pass a lot of laws. And interestingly, the only law which has money in it, the only bills which have money in it, it's either we are authorizing a loan or we are authorizing the national budget. Okay. So those are the only bills which have money in them. But for any legislation, for it to be effective, there has to be an underlying budget to it, to support it to exist. So that's one of the greatest challenges that Parliament is having, and even most ministries, because at the moment, when a girl is being sent back to school, I've had cases in my constituency where now the parent is coming to me as a member of Parliament to say, you sent these child protection workers, they say my child should no longer be married, and now the husband, the apparent husband, the small husband, the young husband, is gone, but he was the one supporting the young wife. And now, you as a member of Parliament, please give us some support. And so they want now to say, you are the one who caused the end of my child's marriage, and you are responsible for taking care of my child. So we want any law through the relevant ministry to have some supporting budget to say, if we do this, this will be the consequences, and this will be the cost for us to maintain this law. So at the moment, I even told one of the child protection workers to say, wow, do you want to bring all these girls to me so that I should be supporting them? That's quite impossible. And there are lots and lots of organizations, NGOs, supporting to end the child marriages, but no one is trying to put attention to say, what happens after? What kind of support are we going to give after we have ended this marriage? So I want that to be something that as a nation we need to connect the two.
And indeed, the child protection receives very little funding. And maybe a question can be to you to say anything that's being done to lobby for more funding, especially because you've actually seen the gap. You're in there, you know that there's this gap about issues of funding in terms of child protection issues. What can you say?
No, it's a very sad situation because almost more than half of them who are on the ground are working as volunteers. The only ones who were employed by the government, there were about 300. The government had trained 800, spent its resources to train 800, but they only recruited like 300. That's almost 5 years or more ago. These others, knowing that they are not being recruited, they have even changed their fields. So they have changed their work. You can't even trace them. So sometimes in Malawi, we have a very nice way of starting something, but we don't like to take it to completion. So even the ones who are working there, they are overstretched because the major idea was to make sure each traditional authority could have at least one child protection worker. But now you find out that that's another story. The other word which the comment that the Deputy Minister had given about the ECDs, up to now, it's just this year where we have passed a budget which is trying to provide some kind of incentive honoraria. That's about 15,000 or so per month. So we have a field. We have a field where most serious issues are taking place and denting the image of our nation. Because we shouldn't be proud to say we are the nation with the highest in number of child marriages or teenager pregnancies. That's not a record we should be proud of. So because of that, we needed to make sure that we address the critical issues in the workers themselves who are the frontline fighters in that fight.
I suppose something is being done on the issues of funding. I hope so.
We are lobbying.
We are lobbying.
Yes.
All right. There's something that you talked about, but I think we'll get back to the Deputy Minister before. I think we now want to talk to our mom, Edna Tanazio from Change. Takulandirani program. Ndiyo no kwambiri tufuna ziwefa nthawi ina yake munapezeka kuti mwana wanu wamukwatiwisa. Ndeti imve kuti kodi chinachitika ndi chani kuti mwanayo mukwatiwise apite kubanja nthawi yake isanakwane.
Naona kuti si chinthu cha nzeru mwanayo po atachimwa nachimwira standard 8 ndiye atachimwa basi nkubadwisa mwana ndiye basi iye anachiganiza mweyeka anakuti mama ayi neyo pepani nakula kwerani bwanji ati amene natenga pathupi koma naona kuti chakuti akaniyankha bwinobwino ndeti nidzatani dzayambira school naona kuti wachira basi mwana uja akukula amuletsa kuyamwa kenaka mmene amayambati maganyu mwayeka ndena neso ni mamulimbikiritsaso kuti azona kutengetse gulu kula bwino chifukwa ukapanga zinthu zowayowayo mmene zinapangikiramo nzola kuike fa ulibe tsogolo naneso ndibe chani tsogolo.
Koma mwanayo munambelitsa kubanja?
Mwanayo anadzapita koma sanakhalitsepo ayi.
Oho. Chimene chinakupangisa kuti musinthe maganizo ndi chani? Fapo yamba mwana uja atachimwa mwananena kuti mupita mukalowa banja. Nanga si wachimwa. Nthawi zambiri makhala kuti fa choti mwanayo wachimwa. Mwina anakhala kuti analibe mimba sibweza atatani atapita koma nkhani nali yoti mwachimwa tsopano mupite kuti kubanja. Kenako munazapeza kuti mwasintha. Munachina kupangisa kuti musinthe ndi chani?
Ini makhala nosinkhasinkha nthawi yonse mmene zinamchitikira mwana kuti nimuvomereza apitebe kubanja ayi ine chindipweteka koma mwanawe upitebe kuti ku school ndiye anavomereza nemtima wake wonse naneso navomereza nemtima wanga wonse ndiye pakumvaso ndi mudzi wathu akamalengeza ndiye chimatigunda mu mtima naona kuti mwana uyuyu niwochepadi afunikadi kuti ku school ni panobe akadaphunzirabe.
Makolo ena amakwatitsana kwambiri fwa cha mphawi nanga sapezako kenakake mwina mulandirako kenakake kuchoka kubanja kuja ale abasi pitani tikalandira kenakake titani tikhala ngati tafika pena pake. Inuyo chifukwa chimene munambirisa mwana chinali chongoti fati mufuna mulandireko kenakake kubanja linalo kapena munangoti abasi poti wachimwa basi wapanga zola kuika fa mwanena kuti mwana anamba kupepesa kuti ayi koma amayi ine tisatani ndisapite. Munalandirako jumbo kumene?
Ayi.
Kubanja kwinako?
Ayi suta.
Chabwino. Tathokoza tibweranso kanthawi kenakake kwambiri mafuna nditadziwa kuti mwana uja atapita kubanja kuja chimene chinamuchitikira kumene koko chinali chani. Mwina chimenecho chimene chinakupangisani kuti ngati mayi kuganiza kuti ayi mwana wanga bwerako.
Tsopano iyeyo atapita kubanja kuja sanakhalitsepo. Ola anapita anapita ni mtima woperera ndithu samafuna bendithu koma chifukwa kuti mwamunayo anamuvomera nena kuti ine nikukwatira nikusunga ndiye nayenso makolo ake amwanayo wa mamunayo anapezeka nena kuti wawonso akupitiriza bechani skulu ndiye panonso anamaliza iyeyo ndiye ine ndinati ayi olo kuti iye anamaliza koma nanenso wanga nofuna kuti atatani atapita bekuka skulu kuti apeze tsogolo lake labwino ifwa iyeyo ni mwana wachichepere iyeyo ni wamasiye bambo wake anatisiye.
Inu yonga likholo ndinokondwa bwanji kuti mwana wanu anabwerera ku skulu akukhala nozimira payekha?
Pano nachilandira ndi manja awiri ni mtima wanga wonse nayenso amakhala ndithu ali wokondwera mpaka nakufikira naonena kuti tsiku linalililonse amama tidzachita bwino. Ulendo unonso umene nabwera kunoko wanipempherera kwambiri amama nikufunirani zabwino zonse pitirizani ulendo wanu momwe mudawuyambira kuno ndipatsa nzeru.
Chabwino zikomo kwambiri amene wandi mayi Edna Tanazio kuchokera ku Mchinji. Iwowa mwana wawo anakwatiwa ndithu ataona ra muli ndi mimba ayi mukwatiwe koma nthawi naye kanapeza kuti asintha maganizo. So along the way she changed her mind about her child getting married. So I want to get back to you, Honorable Deputy Minister. I think two things. Number one is the issue of the poverty aspect, which also leads a lot of parents to actually marry off their children because they actually think they're going to get something out of it. Mm-hmm. And I think another issue would be, you talked about having sensitization meetings especially. And then I think specific issue from the Ministry of Education, structures that are there to actually help give out more information to the girls. You've talked about the empowerment so that the girls should know it's okay. If you get pregnant, you can get back to school, but that kind of empowerment that we need. But I think specific issues, maybe on issues of the curriculum, specific issues on bringing out the sexual and reproductive health rights issues that can actually help a girl to know and understand and actually make an informed decision on their lives. So maybe those two issues to address.
Okay, thank you very much. Poverty is a serious issue, not just in this country, but in many countries in the region and even outside the region. And sometimes I think when we are not going through what these parents maybe go through, it may be easier for us to judge. But all in all, we still want to send a strong message to parents to say education for their children, girls and boys equally, is a human rights issue. And they have to make sure that poverty or without poverty, these kids will have to go to school. Because at the end of the day, when these learners also get the education that they deserve, they'll be able then to stand on their own. They'll be able to get the economic empowerment. They'll be able to stand on their own 2 feet and be able to be responsible citizens of the country. So it's just, I think it also goes back to issue of a sensitization. Because I think the parents that have the knowledge, that have the awareness that they can, some things can wait, but the gains that are going to be acquired, the gains that they're going to be when they wait, when their child actually go to school, go to all the way to secondary or go all the way to tertiary, are going to be far much better than the short-term gains that they're going to get by marrying off their young children. And you will note that most of these girls, when they go to these early marriages, they don't even, these early marriages, they don't even last. Usually after a year, after 2 years, 3 years, they're back. And they'll go try and find another husband. The vicious cycle continues, and also the cycle of poverty just continues. So it's a lot of work that we have to do, and the work that has to go to actually the communities. I think if we work with communities, which we're actually even doing as we speak, we're working with PTAs, which parents-teacher associations in schools. We have what we call as mother groups.
Yes.
Some NGOs are also doing their own programs. I was impressed of late to hear of a program that's being sponsored by an NGO, that they have something that's called as is it a responsible father? Something like that. So I've just forgotten a bit. But where they're also bringing the men, because it's usually the men, the women that are brought into the equation, but they're also bringing the men so that the men also understand the importance of making sure that their girl child is educated. And in those where that has been done, where in those communities, the results are amazing. We found actually that the dropout rates are getting less, because the fathers are actually helping the women to ensure that there are even resources in the homes to make sure that these girls also go to school. But even the dropout, even the girls that have left school are encouraged by both the mother and the father to go back to school and continue with the education. There's a lot that we need to do, but I think it boils down, like I said, to sensitization, because once the parents, the guardians, the community is equipped with the right knowledge, knowing that when they educate their girls, they've educated the nation, and that we are going to actually progress further and quicker with more females being educated, I think it will move in the right direction.
Thank you very much. Maybe probably the last question inside the curriculum of the from what is it there that can help our girls feel empowered to have enough information?
Okay, so we do have some programs in the ministry where we are teaching, some of them, I'm trying to label them. There's a life skills component. There's life skills and social development, also subject that's being incorporated in the curriculum, where we actually have teachers teaching learners on issues of how to be self-assertive, and teaching them how to be confident, how to actually know how to make decisions. So it's these kind of subject areas that can actually teach the girl child to know when to do what and not to do what, because it will keep them with decision making, knowing to make the right decisions, to say, I actually need to go to school, even if the parent is not with it, but the child themselves know the benefits of staying in school. These kind of lessons are also teaching the girls and boys alike to also be assertive, to say no means no. When I say no, nobody else can force me to do that which that I'm not interested in. We also having something that needs to be perfected, but also having issues on sexual reproductive health, where children also need to know that they're places that they can go to. There are spaces that they can be assisted with issues of family planning and other issues to do with their with them that can actually allow them to stay longer in school, to actually get the education that they need to get at the end of the day.
As we wrap up, I think there's an aspect of the child protection committees that also have quite have a duty, especially to contribute in terms of enforcement. I think I will also allow Superintendent Ngwala to say something, but maybe as you wrap up, you can have something to say. Does the Ministry of Education also work with such structures?
Yes, thank you. We do work with these child protection committees, in which the Ministry of Social Welfare, Child Protection Officer, police, and chiefs are members. And these committees, there are also referral pathways spelled out to teachers and learners. So this goes back to the issue that Honorable Kafwafwa did raise, to say on issues of bullying, where maybe a student that's now a mother is in school, they actually are given I would say like spaces or people where they can actually report this kind of abuses, this kind of bullying that's happening in school. So these structures are there, and we do work in close liaison with them, knowing that it's through these that we can also have a way to make sure that our girls are continuing with education even after dropping out. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Deputy Minister. Honorable Kafwafwa, as we wind up, what bold action do you think should be taken for us to end child marriages? Bold and the meaningful actions that we need to take to end child marriage in Malawi.
I think the major issue in Malawi is first addressing the gap that exists in our education system. That is, about 90% of the Malawian population, they have no access to early childhood development kind of education, because that has proven to be a key to make sure that the girl can understand things better, can accelerate better in education, and then that's a major prevention in terms of child marriages. So that's the key that we would want to see as a nation, to move into that direction, because only those who have money, they are the ones who are able to send their kids to the nursery schools. But in the villages, that gap still exists. So a 14-year-old girl, a 17-year-old girl is still in standard 8.
And not a lot of child marriages are not reported among those that are able to do.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So we need to make sure that first, we as a nation, we should address that gap. Then finally is whereby we want to make sure that our laws are being enforced accordingly and with the right budgets, because that's what we normally get complaints from the courts, from the police, that whatever laws they have, sometimes we are failing to enforce them because they don't have the resources. So we know the resource envelope is still very small, but
And
we
we're
should
hoping,
try.
as you've said,
Yes,
you are lobbying.
to make sure that it's
Superintendent Ngwala, what
Right.
bold action should we take?
Yeah, the first one is prevention, because if we prevent, then everything will be okay. Children will not get married. So it is the role of parents, traditional leaders, faith community, and all other people in the community to ensure that we end child marriage. Second one is reporting. As police, we have community policing structures in all local government structures. We have community policing forums, crime prevention committees, crime prevention panels, police units, and we also visit schools with the program known as Safe Schools Program or Youth and Schools Outreach Program, where we're interacting with the learners. The aim is to make sure that there is a reporting pathway, that everything that is happening with the children, including child marriage, should be reported to police. So sometimes we just stay not reporting the issue and start saying that action is not being taken. So we should take action as community to report issues of child marriage to police or any other closest authority to make sure that we prevent child marriage.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
My Edna, magolo amene ako amakwatiritsa ana osiyana-siyana atsikanawo ali achichepere mungauze chani nthawi yochepa imene tili nayo mwalimbikitsa chani kuti nkhani zokwatiritsa ana achichepere sizoyenerera?
Apapa ansanga nimati ndikamakhala nawo amanifusafusa kuti kodi amainu maganiza bwanji kuti mwana apiteso ku skulu, nikuti imacheza naye basi tikamakhala basi mukambitsa ndithu nkhani ya chilimbikiritso kuti mwana akachimwa ku skulu usamtengere kuti poti wabereka mwana mnzake kuti wakula munzeru, ayi kuti wakula muje chifukwa cha mwana, ayi koma akule ndithu munzeru nayeso adzapange zake ndi adzaona bwino tsogolo. Ndiye azimayi anzanga kuti naneso wanga nitani nidzampititsa, ndiye moti ena kumeneko kumene nachokako ali pakafukufuku kuti atengeko mbali ya mwana wangayo.
Chabwino, tathokoza kwambiri. And that's how we wrap up our program today, Ending Child Marriage, a national call to action. Just under half of the girls in Malawi are married as children. Malawi has one of the highest rates of child marriage in sub-Saharan Africa and in the world. These are self-inflicted wounds on the whole country. Child marriage robs girls and their childhood and their future, violates their human rights, and exposes them to violence, poverty, and poor health. And it derails the nation's development aspirations by limiting the economic and social contributions of many of our fellow Malawians. We need to do something. You should do something. I should do something. All of us should do something. Many thanks to our panelists today, and Honorable Deputy Minister, Honorable Madalitso Kambauwa Wirima. Thank you so much for coming to the program. And Honorable Savel Kafwafwa, Member of Parliament for Dedza North and Chairperson for Social and Community Affairs Committee of Parliament. Thank you so much for coming to the program. And Superintendent Alexander Ngwala, Regional Community Policing Coordinator. Thank you so much for coming to the program. And my Edna Tanazio from Uchinji, a parent who once married off her daughter but changed her mind along the way to give her an opportunity to go back to school. That was a good program.
Zikomo kwambiri.
And my name is Twesa Ngosi. And in case you want to join the discussion, you can do that by sending a message to 54141. And if you send that, you can actually write ECM, Ending Child Marriage, and then send a message to 54141. Or you can actually, maybe if you have a question or you have a comment, you can actually do that. You can also join the discussion on our Facebook page, Zodiac Online. You can also send a message to a WhatsApp message to 997-932-888, 0997-932-888. We'll be back next week with another program. This has been Twesa Ngosi. Bye for now.